Coloring Crypto.
Today on Coloring Crypto, our guest is my cousin David. So he's been at this for a while, and I knew that, but not really. So check it out. So last July, our extended family is all in Puerto Vallarta for my parents' 50th wedding anniversary. It was this awesome family gathering, grandkids and cousins splashing in the pool, great aunts and uncles chilling under the palapa. So I was, planning this podcast at the time and got talking to my cousin. So he got into Bitcoin enough years ago that he's done pretty well. And hodls. So I got to ask him just about every question I had. And it was almost the sort of origin podcast. Coloring Crypto is now a weekly podcast releasing new episodes every Sunday. Tweet us at Coloring Crypto and please leave us a review on iTunes. As a weekly podcast, we can give you long-form episodes, sharing more of our conversations, like today with Cousin David. Thank you, Cousin David, for agreeing to do this interview. Just a quick background is I just started working with some friends to really dig into cryptocurrency, and as part of my interest in learning things, I just thought, let me start a podcast. And, when I put up a Facebook post, I got a bunch of great responses. You filled out most of the leads, but then I had a lot of people who are just friends who are like, I can't wait to hear this because I keep hearing these buzzwords about cryptocurrency, and, people want to understand what it is. Give me just a quick summary of your background.
Sure. I've been a tech nerd since the 7th grade. When I got home from school, I'd want to be writing code on the computer if I wasn't playing with friends, playing video games. And then as I got older, I got into investing in the year 2000. So I've been investing for 17 years. And then I found out I was a libertarian. And then when I heard about Bitcoin, that just really fit all three of those, the programming, the finance, the libertarianism of it. And so I just fell in love with Bitcoin, and that was about 4 or 5 years ago.
That's awesome. And could you define what Bitcoin is and sort of how it sort of fit those three parts of your background?
Sure. So I think instead of defining it, I'll talk about when I got excited about Bitcoin in 2013. One of the things that really got me excited was the idea of being able to send money anywhere instantly in the world for free. So that was what I first got excited about Bitcoin. I just thought it'd be really cool if I could, send my cousin Gabe money, $1 or a penny right now for free over the internet. And I thought, why shouldn't that work already? And then even if you were in Japan or on the moon, it's even better if I can still send it to you instantly for free. That's what got me, really excited about Bitcoin and thinking about all the good that could do for the world.
What was the price of Bitcoin when you first got interested, and then when you first invested?
So when I first got interested in it, it was in December of 2011. And I think the price per Bitcoin back then was about $3 or $5. And, I checked it out and I thought, this is really cool technology, but it's never going to go anywhere. And then in 2013 was when I made my first investment because, that year, I think it was Cyprus. They had maybe taken money out of people's bank accounts or something like that. And when we have our money with somebody else, we don't really have control over it. And with Bitcoin, you actually can have control over your money. And so when Cyprus did that, I think the price of Bitcoin went from like $10 or $15 to $270 in the spring of 2013. And so that caught my attention, and I said, oh, hey, this thing is going somewhere. This thing actually has a shot at really doing something. I thought it was an unlikely shot. I thought it was unlikely to happen, but I thought if it did happen, the magnitude was going to be big. Like if it worked, the impact was going to be huge.
And the shift for you from 2011, when you first checked it out, to 2013, was that sort of Cyprus event when people seemed to be using Bitcoin to sort of preserve and control their own money?
Yeah. So in 2011, when I looked at it, I mean, even today, there's really not that many people using it, and it's got a network effect. So it's like, the telephone or Facebook, they're not useful if nobody uses them. And money and Bitcoin are the same way, where they're not useful if nobody's using them. And just every day, there are more and more people using Bitcoin and more applications for Bitcoin, and Bitcoin's easier and easier to use. So every day it's becoming more and more valuable as a network.
And are you also invested in other currencies like Ethereum or other ones?
Yeah, I've got Bitcoin, Ethereum, Bitcoin Cash, Ethereum Classic, and Civic, which is a little bit different from Bitcoin and Ethereum, because it's a token that's issued by a company.
Could you sort of then define, like, so how is Bitcoin different than Ethereum, different than from Civic?
Yeah, so Bitcoin, I think that one, the easiest way to think about that is sending money fast and free anywhere. Although that's changed a little bit since 2013. Now it's getting a little bit slower and more expensive. Um, and there's competition in the space, which is good. And so then, one of the competitors to Bitcoin potentially is Ethereum. So Bitcoin's value proposition is pretty simple, where it's like digital cash or digital gold. It's probably a better way to think about it. Ethereum is more complicated, where it can do everything Bitcoin can do, but it can also execute computer code when you do financial transactions. So if you and I had a transaction and we said, hey, if the Lions beat the San Francisco 49ers today, then I'll owe Gabe $1,000.
How would you plug in that information? What would validate that the Niners had won, or what the score was? Like, how would that get kind of plugged into the algorithm?
Yeah, so that's an interesting way. So you could have different ways to think about that. So in the real world, you have that same problem too, where if we make that bet, how do we make sure that Dave's going to pay, that Gabe's going to pay, that whoever is handling the transaction, maybe if there's a broker in the middle, that person doesn't run off with the money. And so the cool thing about Ethereum is that when you code it, everything's going to happen exactly as it's coded. The computer's never going to, just decide I'm going to run off with your money. And we can set up in such a way where I put my money in and you put your money in. And then there's no opportunity that I'm going to, squelch on you, or that you're going to squelch on me. But then that gets to the point too, like, how does the computer know who won? So there are, a variety of ways that you could try to, either decode that and say, we're going to check like the Google, the Google search results, have the computer check the Google search results the day after the game or something like that. Or you could designate some people as oracles or as companies, so that maybe you check with 2 or 3 people and you ask them, who won, the Lions or the San Francisco 49ers, and they tell the contract, whoever won, and that way, and then the code executes and releases the funds.
And like, what level of tech savvy would we have to execute like that example, or was that kind of stuff sort of already built and we would just ride on top of it?
No, today it's really early days. Ethereum, I'm trying to think when it launched. I think it was launched in 2014 for the public to buy into it, and I think the network maybe went live in 2015. And so it's really early, and there are going to be bugs in these contracts. Even when some of the people who built Ethereum make these contracts, and the industry is just going to have to advance, and that stuff's going to get easier. And like you said, eventually, maybe a year or 5 years from now, maybe there'll just be a website that you go to, and it'll be really easy to make these kind of contracts, where my dad or somebody can just go and do drag and drop to make standard contracts.
How many people in the world are evolved enough coders to write code like this? Like, how complicated is it?
So there's code for Ethereum itself, and then there's code for the contracts. And so the code for contracts is going to be a lot smaller and easier to wrap your head around than the actual Ethereum code base. Be hard to guess at how many people, are actively coding in these currencies today. I don't know off the top of my head. If I was to guess, I would guess less than 100,000, maybe in the 20 to 30,000 range. But part of that too is that there's not as much demand for them as there probably will be in the future. So maybe 10 years from now or 20 years from now, there will be a whole lot of people able to code these types of contracts.
And I mean, what's sort of interesting for me as I, begin to learn about this and looking at how Bitcoin is like clearly the sort of the market leader, the largest kind of market capitalization. And I'm just wondering, I mean, it looks to me like, like you were saying, Bitcoin is getting slower the more people are exchanging it. And there's clearly room for, better, faster alternatives. And like, it seems like there's just many, many of those springing up. I mean, like, what keeps Bitcoin at the top? Is it just that it was first to market? Like, what are the barriers to entry, and why wouldn't something else come along that would just quickly replace it because it was, faster, better, and fulfilling some of the, areas where Bitcoin was weak?
Yes, that's a pretty interesting question. So one of the things that plays a big part is the brand of it, Bitcoin. So when you have money, you want to trust the money. If you get paid for a job or for work or something like that, your time is valuable, and when you exchange it, you want whatever you get to be worth something in the future. When you go to buy a house or buy groceries or whatever that is. With currencies, I think people don't think about it a lot, but if they thought about it, the history of a currency and how it's held its value is really important in how you would expect that to do in the future. So you might look at the U.S. dollar and say, oh, inflation is about 2%, and it's been about that for, I don't know, maybe 100 years or something like that. So it'll probably be pretty stable going forward. If you look at Bitcoin, Bitcoin's only been around since 2009, so you've got about 8 years of history. If you look at something like Ethereum, it's been around for like 2 years. So there's less history for these newer ones to go on. And then the other thing is the brand. Like if you think like, oh, Richard Branson supports Bitcoin, and Mark Andreessen supports Bitcoin, that makes you feel more comfortable about Bitcoin. So brand is one thing. Then the other thing is just the infrastructure itself. There's a lot more things that you can do with Bitcoin than you can with other cryptocurrencies, because Bitcoin has been around there longer, and so there are more companies that have built services around Bitcoin, and there are more merchants accepting Bitcoin than any of the other coins. So if you or I launched Dave Coin or Gabe Coin today, then we have to convince merchants to use it, convince people to give value to it. So we have some really big hurdles, and then people, in their mind, they have to say like, why would I accept Dave Coin or Gabe Coin when there's Bitcoin? Like, what advantages does that have?
What would be a coin that came along where you're like, wow, that one just took a huge leap in evolution that that really could challenge Bitcoin to be like the standard?
Ethereum is really interesting because that one, it's not really designed to be a currency, but designed to be, this like contracts platform. But it also has a currency aspect to it, and it has a really great development team. Bitcoin's had some challenges in that area, and there's been a fracture. So when I talk about Bitcoin getting slower and more expensive, people like me, think that's a bad thing. We think, why in the world would we want a digital currency that's slow and expensive? We can just use dollars. If we want that, I can ACH you money, and it can take, I don't know, a day or 5 days to get to you. And cost, I don't know, 50 cents or whatever. Or I can wire transfer you money and it gets there right now, but it costs me, I don't know, $20 or $25. Some of the areas that are interesting are around anonymity. So with Bitcoin, all the transactions are logged forever. And so, that could be problematic if you're, doing something illegal or, doing something that you don't want other people to know. Like I know some of my friends hide some of their transactions. If they go to certain clubs or read certain magazines, they don't want their partners to know about that, and so they might pay for those in cash or use a separate credit card that their spouse doesn't know about. On Bitcoin, all the transactions are always recorded, and so if you do a transaction and somebody ever figures out, essentially your account number, they can look and say, oh, Gabe Mott did this and this and this. So if you're dodging taxes or doing something you don't want people to know about, then that can cause a problem for you.
When I first heard about it, it was through kind of like just the media around, Silk Road and people buying drugs. And when I first signed up on like Coinbase a few years ago, I was like, wait, how is this anonymous? This is not, it was like asking for a lot of layers of my bank account and social security card and all these things. And so can you elaborate on like, how would somebody find my ID? Like that you just,
over time because it's always there. Just if they kept looking, they would find it.
So the technical term is pseudonymous, and so there's a couple things. So one, we'll talk about like the simple scenario. So in the simple scenario, you could imagine that a Bitcoin account is like a bank account where it has a number associated with it. So if I have a bank account and it's bank account number 35, and then you can see all the transactions that bank account number 35 has ever done. If you ever find out that bank account 35 is associated with David Smith, you can say, oh, he shopped at Toys R Us and he shopped at Walmart, and all these things. So the trick is finding out who owns bank account number 35. To your point, if you use a service like Coinbase, because they're in the U.S. and they comply with the U.S. Know Your Customer laws and anti-money laundering laws, they need to collect a bunch of identifying information about you. So Coinbase has to know who their customers are, and they know who all those bank accounts are associated with, and then they report that information to the IRS and things like that. And then the other piece of it is you might not know who has bank account 35, but you might look at bank accounts in aggregate and look at how the transactions move between them. And then you might say, oh, the owner of bank account 35 also probably owns bank account number 99 because there's multiple transactions between those two every month. And that's an area of research where people are looking through the blockchain to associate. The blockchain's a record of all the transactions that have ever occurred, to associate accounts together, and they use statistical analysis to clump these accounts and say the same owner who owns this one owns the other ones, and then they just need that other piece to find the identifying information and say, oh, this is Gabe Mott's account, this is David Smith's account, and he also has these other 4 or 5.
It's interesting when we talked in Mexico when I saw you last. I'd known that you were involved in cryptocurrency and investing in it, but I didn't know to the extent to which you had kind of gotten involved early. And I asked you about like the volatility, and if you were actively trading. And since then, like the whole thing with China banning ICOs and coming out with some heavy statements, and then there was a lot of volatility. How much does that concern you, and do you pay attention to that, or how active are you?
Try not to pay attention to it. It's a little bit hard not to. I have a high percentage of my net worth in Bitcoin, so it is somewhat relevant. But I got into Bitcoin because of the volatility. So like money is pretty stable. Like the U.S. dollar, if something costs $100 today, it's probably going to cost $100 next year. So if I have a $100 bill, I can probably use that to buy whatever costs $100. And then you have kind of the riskier something is, the higher the return that you usually get as an investor for taking on that risk. So after dollars, it might be like money market accounts, and then bonds, and then maybe like mutual funds, index funds, stocks, and then you can get into more speculative things, like startups or Bitcoins, and those are usually called like alternative assets or something like that. And so I got into Bitcoin because of the volatility, and I want the volatility, and I expect someday Bitcoin will not be volatile, and then I'll be looking to probably deploy my capital elsewhere.
Is there a sort of a understood methodology of like the value of Bitcoin, where that's like, is there some kind of like ratio of, I don't know, market cap to number of volume of exchanges, or is it really sort of just more arbitrary that this is just what people are buying and selling it at?
For me, I think a lot of Bitcoin's price today is speculation. So I think of it like a Facebook stock. In the early days, if you were like in Mark Zuckerberg's dorm room and he asked you to invest in Facebook, that value is going to move around a lot. And what's the actual value worth at that point? Who knows? And if you model that out, it's going to depend a lot on the assumptions that you use. And so for Bitcoin today, though, it's at like $67 billion market cap. I like to think about it in comparison to gold. So I think about Bitcoin as digital gold. Gold, last time I looked, was around like $8 trillion. And so I think, Bitcoin at 67 billion, I think, it'll start being interesting when it's in the trillions. And then in terms of the volatility, I think there's even volatility between country currencies like the U.S. dollar and the euro, or the Japanese currency or the Chinese currency, and so I think the really interesting thing is the volatility would dissipate or disappear when people start denominating their services or goods in Bitcoin. So if I was selling you consulting services, if I price that in Bitcoin instead of USD, and then oh hey, this is in Bitcoin, and so if it's like 1 Bitcoin for a car or something like that, then you just know, well, if I have 1 Bitcoin this year or next year, I can buy that car. Whereas if we have it denominated in dollars, and then you're paying in Bitcoin, then the prices are going to move around.
If you think back to like 2013 when you were just kind of getting into this, what was your learning process like? Were you just, self-learning on Google and finding connections? And like, how did you kind of get up to the sort of understanding you're at today?
Yeah, it was a lot of internet forums initially, and there was a podcast called Let's Talk Bitcoin with Andreas Antonopoulos, who's probably the best speaker on Bitcoin today. And there was another one called Plan B, which was kind of a play on Bitcoin starts with a B, but also saying our current system, our current monetary system is not good, and we need another option. So it was like Plan B, and I don't remember either of those hosts. And then to take it to the next level, I started going to conferences. So I went to my first Bitcoin conference in I think it was October of 2013, and I believe on that Wednesday, the Silk Road that you mentioned earlier, which was an online like drug marketplace or dark marketplace, they had gotten busted by the feds on a Wednesday, and the price of Bitcoin at that point, I think I was up about 50% on my investment after I've been in a couple months, and the price dropped that day, so I lost everything that I'd made, and a little bit more, all just in like 2 hours. And I was like a deer in the headlights, like looking at the price chart. I was like, what just happened here? And it really hurt, like a punch in the gut. And I think, in total dollar terms, it was like $5,000 or $6,000. I mean, at the time, it just, I don't know. Since I watched, when I get new investments, I watch them closely, and then after they sit for a while, I kind of get used to them. So like $5,000 or $6,000, for me, that might happen in like a second now. But back then, it was like a big deal. But anyways, on that Wednesday, the Silk Road got busted and got shut down, and I didn't know what the price was going to do because I didn't know how much of a determining factor this illicit marketplace was in the price of Bitcoin. And that Friday, I was going to my first Bitcoin conference. And actually, I think that morning of that first conference on Friday, I was at the hotel I was staying. I think they had Bitcoin on the news, which was pretty amazing to see that like on a news broadcast. I'm at a Bitcoin conference.
What was the mood at the conference? Were other people as well kind of like deer in headlights, or was there kind of like a sort of a sound response to it?
No, actually, that conference was really interesting. This one, I wouldn't have went to it if I would have paid more attention to the agenda. I think I wanted to go to start doing some business in the Bitcoin space. I wanted to go and meet other entrepreneurs and launch some Bitcoin startups. But instead, this conference was it exposed me for the first time in my life to the idea of like, what if we had a society with no government? Would that be better? And how would that work? And I had never. That thought had never even crossed my mind.
That's one of the questions I think that when I was asking people what they wanted to hear about, there was a lot of people that heard word of how the blockchain could be a foundation for some kind of like non-government or kind of like utopian society. Like, can you explain a little bit like what that concept is?
I can try. I think it's interesting. 'Cause I mean, I haven't looked super close, but I just don't know of any modern societies that have ever had a society with no government. And I have spent, a bit of time thinking about that over the past 4 years. But I think Bitcoin could be really important to the world, even if Bitcoin is just a viable alternative to people, like gold used to be. With the governments controlling their currency, in the U.S., I don't think we see it too much. But when I was a kid, I always thought like, oh man, these damn companies, these damn greedy companies, they're raising their prices every year. They're actually not raising their prices every year. The cost of producing goods in absolute terms goes down because every year companies they get better and they learn how to better manage their supply chain and get more efficiency out of their means of production. So every year by default, prices would go down for goods. But instead we see prices going up, and the reason for that is because of inflation. And so the government kind of has this hidden tax on us, which in America is small enough to not be really noticeable year to year. But if you look at like a 100-year period, that's why your grandparents could buy bread for a nickel. And today it costs maybe $2 at the store. It's because of inflation. And so it's massive over time, but year to year, it's kind of hidden from people here in the U.S. In other countries, if you look at like Venezuela or Argentina, they've got these huge inflation problems, and it's because the government just kind of spends themselves, and instead of going bankrupt, they just print more and more money.
Could you describe like a typical morning or day for you as it like what tools are you using? How much time are you spending? What are you doing on a day that you are kind of like digging in and doing stuff with it?
Yeah. So most days I actually don't pay too much attention. Although if there's big price movements, people will send me text messages. Question number one is like, are you selling? Are you freaking out? And question number two is this a good time for me to buy? And the answer, for the past 4 years has been no, I'm not selling. If you think if you want to buy, be prepared to lose all your money and be prepared to be on this wild ride. So on days when I do dig in, a lot of times it's being in some chats with people or reading specific articles. I used to spend a lot more time in Bitcoin. In like 2013 to 15, I would probably spend about 2 hours a day reading about Bitcoin. Back then, the community was a lot different. Earlier, you talked about the mood at that specific conference I was at, and it was a little bit weird because it was not really related to business or to the price, but just to I don't know, I guess really like freedom and things like that. But other conferences are very. I haven't been to one maybe in a year or two, but they are very. The sentiment is like very dependent on the price of Bitcoin. If it's at an all-time new high, then it's like I don't know, like the wildest party you've ever been to, where people just have like these huge grins on their faces that they can't wipe off. And if the price is like high, but not, but it's like 20% down from the year before or half from the year before, people are like moping around like it's a funeral. And the funny thing too is like when you're at these conferences, they all talk about how it's going to change the world and make the world a better place. And so as time goes on, by any other metric than price, it is doing that. It's providing more value to the world. But it seems like people don't actually really care about that. They just really care about how much is it adding to their personal bank account.
Yeah. I mean, so when you say like you're on chat tools, like I just got on Telegram about a month ago, and suddenly like I'm subscribed to like a dozen different chat rooms, all kind of discussing various aspects of cryptocurrency, and it's totally overwhelming. Like, what are you using? Like, where are you going when you're in chat?
Yeah, Telegram's too much for me. I get a lot through Facebook now, where just like I have a lot of Facebook friends who are in Bitcoin, and so if I just scroll through Facebook, I'll see news about Bitcoin. The same thing for Twitter. So Bitcoin or Facebook, Twitter. There's a Slack that I'm in. That's a local community to me in Michigan, and so that's where I want to read all those messages. And there's a few Facebook groups too that I'm in that are also Michigan specific. Like you, I got invited to some Telegram groups and things like that, but just the traffic is too much for me to keep up on. I don't know. At one point, I think I had 60,000 or 160,000 notifications or something because there's like a Bitcoin group that I just never opened, and it had like 500 people in it, and they were talking all the time.
So let's say you had somebody call you and who's not been involved in this at all, and they want to start getting involved. Obviously it sounds like the first thing you would tell them is like be prepared to lose all your money. But like what would be like the specific tools? What website do they go to for a beginner? How does somebody get involved?
Yeah. I think actually I'm a pretty horrible salesman for Bitcoin. If I was Wolf on Wall Street or something, I'd be talking about like, well, first you got to pick out your mansion.
Right.
Then you got to pick out the color of your Lamborghini. But instead, I tell people to be prepared, to lose all their money. And there are, bad stories of people, having their money, hacked and stolen when they're in Bitcoin or losing it. But on the whole, anybody who got in and didn't leverage themselves up and borrow a bunch of money and just bought and held, they're up a lot probably. If you're in before this year, then you've made at least 3 times your money. And if you've been in it the past 4 or 5 years, then you're up at least 10x, if not 40x your money. And that's gonna be really hard to think about. If you put in $1,000, then we're talking about that you're at like $3,000 to $40,000 from a $1,000 investment. And if you put in $100,000, then we're talking like 300,000 to 4 million, I think, something like that. So I think it can be like hard for people to wrap their heads around those kinds of gains. And that's another thing I've noticed too, is that a lot of people when they do get in, they buy Bitcoin and they have $1,000 in there, and then it goes to 2,000. So they double their money and then they sell. So I've seen that a lot too, where people get out and then they regret it later. So it can be tough. And I've noticed that too. For me, it's harder when Bitcoin has these big run-ups than when it has the downswings. Should I get out? But anyways, for getting started, for me, the best way to get started is to put a small amount of money into something. So for Bitcoin, I think if you put in like $5 or $100, some amount of money, maybe it's less than an hour's worth of your time if you were to work. That way, if you lose it, no big deal. But what I found is that I like the idea of Bitcoin, and I was interested in it before I bought. But after I bought it, that really was like a catalyst for me to like dig in, and then instead of just looking at the price like in the abstract, then I started like tracking it. I don't know, almost with like it intensified my memory and interest in a way that I don't think could have happened without me having made an investment.
And so if you said, you're saying take $5 or $100, where do they go?
If you haven't done stock trading before, then the easiest way is to go to Coinbase.com, and it'll be annoying. They'll ask you for your driver's license number and your date of birth and all this other stuff, but you just put that in, put in your banking info. They're not crooks. They're a $1 billion company. Super smart people, have never been hacked. So you give them all your social security number and all that and your banking info, and then you can buy $1 worth or you can buy $5 worth. A lot of people see the Bitcoin price and they see that it's trading at $4,000 a coin, and they think they need to be able to buy a whole coin, but you don't. You can buy tiny fractions of Bitcoin, and there's no downside to having fractions of a Bitcoin. In the same way that it doesn't matter if you have $1 or 99 cents or $1.01.
So let's say like in this example, let's say it's Uncle Bill, and he puts in $100, goes to Coinbase, makes the account, buys Bitcoin, and then right now then he's just sort of like watching whether it goes up or down. What are some of the resources like you're saying you're kind of on some Facebook groups, but I think anybody who goes in there, it's overwhelming the number of different places. Are there any trusted sort of like resources to kind of like to learn about trends and what's happening and that kind of thing?
Like in terms of I think there's two really different pieces. So I think most people get in because they want to make some money. They get in for the financial piece, and then I think the rest of the people, they get in either for political reasons or for technology reasons. I guess there's also some people, that get in there because they actually want to use it. Maybe to send money home overseas or to do business transactions, between different countries. But most people are probably, mostly interested in financial resources. A lot of people want to like really get into, how do I make a lot of money really fast? I've never found that to work for me, and I've never known anybody personally who has done well actively trading Bitcoin or really any stocks. I think there are people out there. I know there are a lot of people out there who say that they are good at it. I've just never known anyone personally who has traded in and out of Bitcoin and is better off than they would have been if they would have just bought it and let it sit. And I've always avoided that, and I think it's been fantastic for me. And I've done well with my Bitcoin investments.
Like how'd you learn about CIVIC, like the new different coins?
So that one, I knew the founder of the company. I mean, I knew of him. I didn't know him personally. And I used his product actually last year. I signed up for his product. He had a free trial. And then it was an ID theft product. And my identity ended up getting stolen like 2 months later. And this company, helped me resolve that over like 6 months. It would have been a nightmare if I didn't have that product, because I'd probably just have not dealt with it and have people opening up accounts all over in my name. So I knew the founder. I knew he was good. He'd had some exits before. I think one was for like 50 million with a company called Gift. So I knew he knew what he was doing, and then I'd used his product, so I knew his product was good. And so then I was like, yeah, I want to participate in the next thing that he does. And so that was why I did that coin. And I've probably not done at least 100 coins, I would guess. And most of them I just don't even really pay attention to, because I get people wanting me to buy their coins all the time.
Are people reaching out to you that you don't even know, like seeing your name on some group and just asking you questions?
Yep. Yeah, a lot of it I think is through LinkedIn, and then some of it's like friends of friends. I think those are the two big sources, LinkedIn being the primary one. I think they just see I've got some Bitcoin stuff on my LinkedIn profile or on the web somewhere, and they just reach out to me through LinkedIn. Actually, there's another website too, 21.co, and this site lets people, you can pay to send people messages. So like if you had an account on there, you could say like, oh, I Gabe Mott will read your message if you pay me, $1 or $20, and it's all in Bitcoin. And so people reach out to me on there to invest in their initial coin offerings.
How much does it cost to contact you?
I think it's $1. Actually, that's a good question. Because I think sometimes they pay me more. So I don't know if they just do that out of the goodness of their heart.
So I'm getting the cousin rate of free.
Yeah, exactly.
I love it. I had just recently, or the last couple of days, a friend tell me that her boyfriend made $45,000 in a week by, it wasn't mining, but it was doing some kind of proof of stake wallet thing, which I didn't really understand. Like, do you know about that?
Ethereum has a proof of stake. I don't think it's out yet. He might have been doing it like on a test net. It seems like if somebody had big gains like that, maybe they were doing a trade. Or if they already had a bunch of money to begin with, because you can make $45,000, on like $100 million easily, but turning $10,000 into $45,000 in a week, that could be, that can be pretty hard.
Yeah, that's what I think it was. To me, I was like, this doesn't pass the smell test. It was like when all the things were dropping, and she's like, he made $45,000. I'm like, that's crazy. Like,
he could have. Another thing people do too is they borrow money, So he could have bet against. He could have said, I think Ethereum was going to drop, and you can put money at risk, and then it's called leverage, where you can put in like $10,000, but it acts like it's $30,000. So that's something that he could have done.
And where would you do that? Is that like on some kind of private wallet, or is that on like an exchange or Coinbase? Or
on an exchange, yeah. I think Bitfinex is somewhere you could do that. That again is another area I don't play in. And you've seen these. There's been like crazy price drops. Actually, that could be another way he could have done it too. So when you borrow, it's like if I've got $1,000 and I want to go on get it leveraged up and act like it's $3,000 or something like that. These exchanges let me do that, but they're going to charge me for that service. And then if I'm right, everything works out great and I make a ton of money. But if I'm wrong, then they will sell my asset to cover so that oh, I'm wrong, I owe them the money. But what can happen is when Bitcoin's really volatile, people have these levered positions, and then it ends up kind of being like dominoes, where it's like, oh, I'm borrowing money to think Bitcoin's going to go up, but instead it goes down. Now, since I borrowed this money, I have to sell my Bitcoin at whatever price it's at right now. I have to sell it. The exchange makes me to cover my position of being wrong. Then since I'm selling it, that pushes the price down further. And then that might trigger somebody else, like Gabe might be in the same situation. So it's like these dominoes, and it can just like hammer the price. And you'll see these crazy, they call them flash crashes. And there was one, it was on GDAX, and the price of Ethereum went from like $300 maybe, somewhere in the $400 to $200 range, down to, I think it was like $1, or maybe it was even cheaper. Maybe it was even 10 cents in the span of like 5 minutes or something like that. And somebody had a buy order sitting out there, I think at like 10 cents per coin, and I think ended up making, I can't remember the number off the top of my head. I don't know if it was 100,000 or 10,000 or $1 million, in the span of like 5 minutes.
Do you think that was just like almost a mistake? It had to just sitting out there from way back in the day, or were they anticipating that this kind of crash might happen? They're like, let's just put in a fixed buy order if it has a flash crash.
I could see it either way, because actually last November I was buying some Bitcoin, and so I had a buy order probably sitting at like 600, and I just kind of let it sit there until I went to use that money this summer, maybe in like July. So if the price would have flash crashed, down to 600, or if it would have real crashed down to 600, that buy would have been executed and I would have bought it. And so that's very plausible, like you said. Or some people do just have these buy orders sitting at these really low price intervals in case something like this happens, which maybe it happens like once per year, across the whole ecosystem. It's pretty rare.
It'd be pretty, especially with Ethereum again. I'd imagine like that's not going to happen again with Ethereum. But like a lot of these altcoins could, with their extreme volatility, do something like that.
Yeah, and I didn't pay too much attention to it, but I think the exchange refunded people's money who lost on that one, because they said like, hey, this wasn't really fair. So I think Coinbase ended up they own GDAX, but I think they ended up paying like $4 million to the people who lost on this, which they didn't have to, because per their terms, it's all spelled out in there. Like if you borrow, you can lose, and I don't know if that's really good for the ecosystem too, because I think, I don't know, it's hard to say, because it would really suck, if that happened to you or to me. It sucks to whoever it happens to, but it's also like good to have orders be real and have people feel the consequences of their actions.
It's like bailing out the banks.
Yep. Exactly.
Yeah.
And then like, where did that money come from? So that's money that could have went to new features or security or support staff or who knows what.
It definitely sounds like Coinbase is sitting on a bunch of money. If they can do that.
I think they just raised, I can't remember. Maybe they just raised some money recently in the last couple of weeks. I might have been like 100 million, maybe. I can't remember.
Yeah. Hey, also thank you for posting all the potential guests. Can you think of some questions that would be sort of interesting to some folks? They're sort of experts in the cryptocurrency field, or just even some questions to ask that a lot of people listening might want to know. Like, what are some good questions?
Oh yeah. Actually, along those lines too, you asked about resources. So a good one to see prices of different assets is CoinMarketCap.com. Another one that I just started using the other day is this one called COINCAP. So this one's kind of like CoinMarketCap, where it'll tell you the price per coin. But what this one lets me do is put in like the 5 coins that I own, and then on a daily basis, it can tell me what my portfolio is worth and how much it's up or down for the day. And so that one's an app on my mobile phone called COINCAP. Questions for other guests. I think it's always interesting, like, how do people get into Bitcoin? Why are they into Bitcoin? Why are they still into it? What are they worried about? What would cause them to sell their Bitcoins? What are they most excited about? Who do they think it can do the most good for?
Who do you think it could do the most good for?
I think technology helps the poorest people. So I don't think like Bitcoin's going to be a game changer for Warren Buffett or for Bill Gates, and I don't think the internet changed really much for Warren Buffett. But it was a big change for people that are poorer and who don't have access to information or who couldn't broadcast information. I mean, like, it's pretty amazing that you can do a podcast today and it could reach 1 million people or 1 billion people. How would you do that without the internet? And so I think Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, I think, are going to be the same way, where people in the developing world, I think it's going to give them unprecedented financial services. I think today, there's like 7 or 8 billion people in the world, and I think banks service about 500 million, and they just don't want to service the majority of people in the world. And so, when I try to think about life without a bank account, I just don't even know how that would work. But that's the reality for most of the people on this planet today. And if Bitcoin is successful, it's essentially going to level the playing field, where now all of a sudden, the poorest people on the planet have access to the same type of financial services that the richest people on the planet have access to. And that's going to really, open their lives up, for borrowing money, for storing money, for doing business across borders. And so, I think it's going to help them out and help out their families so that they can, have businesses and, contribute to society and support themselves. I think it's going to be really amazing.
How much has that already happened, or like what like how long will that take, do you think, to get the kind of penetration that would make a difference?
I think it's a really good question, and unfortunately, I think it's happening slower than I'd like. My mom's from Venezuela, and I read that in Venezuela, one of the most resource rich countries on earth, because of their oil, that people can't buy toilet paper and toothpaste, and they're eating their pets and things like that, and it's just crazy. Why is that happening? The government mismanaged the resources and the monetary supply there, and now the citizens have to pay the price for that. And it would have been great, if those people all would have had Bitcoin, they'd be, in a better situation.
And on the flip side, what do you worry about?
The thing I worry about the most with these digital currencies, one of the things they do is they give you control of your money. And so if you have a lot of money and you have control of that, how do you protect that if somebody comes to rob you? And then if you're a company, if you're a company with trillions in assets, how do you make sure that nobody ever gets, the passcode to, the keys to this account? And when you're talking about enough money, then it's worth, maybe a person or 10 people dying over, because the financial rewards are so great. So that's something that I'm not sure how we get around.
What do you recommend to people in terms of that kind of security and making sure that they do the right thing with their passwords and protect their investment?
Yeah, I think that's the hardest part today. Our computer systems aren't good. I think one of the easier things is to use, maybe your phone. If you have enough money, then it makes sense to check into cold storage, which is like taking your digital money and turning it into, essentially paper. Yeah, it's best to really dig in if you have life-changing amounts of money. Coinbase has a really cool feature called a vault. So what used to happen, 4 years ago, probably at least once a week on Reddit, somebody would post, I was at the gym, riding my doing my treadmill, and just got a notification, that you just, transferred $60,000 out of your Coinbase account. And they're like, no, I didn't, this is them getting robbed right there. And they just get a little message on their phone, like boom, essentially you just got robbed. And so Coinbase introduced this vault feature. And what this does is you put your coins in the vault, and it'll say, these coins can't be withdrawn for 2 days. So then if you're at the gym, that can never happen where you just got robbed. It'll say instead, you've just initiated a withdrawal, for all of your money. Do you really want to do that? And you'll say, no, that wasn't me. And then they'll save your money. And you can also have it too where somebody else has to authorize the transaction. So you could have like a family member or a close trusted friend have to authorize those transactions. So the funny part is that then it takes this money that's fast, free, instant that I get all excited about, and it makes it slow and hard to use, which kind of makes it look a lot like regular money.
Right. It's sort of irony in there.
Yes, exactly. But yeah, that's the good thing about getting started and just buying like $5 worth, because then you can see how all this stuff works. Another thing to watch out for too is your phone getting taken over. So if people find out you have Bitcoin, if bad guys find out you have Bitcoin, they might try to take over your phone, which has happened to me a couple times.
Wait, how do they take over your phone?
They call up your phone carrier and they pretend to be you, and who knows what they say. But apparently they'll spend hours. I think I might have read 8 hours or 16 hours just trying different phone reps. And they say, oh, the baby's in the background crying, and I just need you to reset my account for this or that. And then they get the phone company to either transfer the SIM card or forward your phone number, and then they try to go after your accounts and get control of your accounts to rob you.
Is that how your identity got stolen?
Nope, that was just through the regular. Just the
regular identity stolen way.
Yeah, like that Equifax breach recently, like that kind of a thing, or who knows what, something of that, something in that space.
Well, this is awesome, man. It's a great sort of foundation. I appreciate you taking the time to help out with this. Is there anything else you'd want to add or think is important to mention?
Yeah, I think it can be tough for people to invest in this asset class. I think some of my friends that have been, that I told about Bitcoin, 4 years ago, they're just starting to get in now. And yeah, I think I think there's not much that's changed in their mind, except they're just like, wow, Dave's been in this thing for 4 years, and he's doing fantastic. I want to get a little piece of that. And I think that makes it really hard to reason about these drops. When you're not in it because you believe in the vision of it, or because you believe in the technology, but you're just in it because you want to like make a quick buck. Then when you get in to make a quick buck, and all of a sudden, it drops, like you said, it dropped from 5,000 down to like 2,950 in like a week, I think, or a few days. I can't remember exactly. If you put $5,000 in, and all of a sudden you're sitting at $3,000, and you're hearing Jamie Dimon from JP Morgan Chase, talk trash about it, and your uncle's calling you an idiot for getting in, and now you just lost a couple months mortgage. That can be a pretty tough situation. And so some of these people, they get in, and then something like that happens, and they sell. Then the price goes back up, and then they're like double kicking themselves because they're like, oh, well, I bought in, I lost, I sold. If I would have held, I'd be up, but I'm not. There was a post I read a few years ago. It was like how I should have made $120,000, but instead lost $4,000. And it was this guy recounting exactly that, where he bought in, the price dropped, he sold. He bought in, the price dropped, he sold. He's like, man. But if he would have just held, he would have made, I don't know, 100 times his money or something in like 2 years. It's hard when you're in it, though.
There's somewhat of a common theme. Like I just learned that whole sort of meme around people saying HODL. What is that whole thing?
I think I missed the origin, but essentially, I think somebody mistyped hold, like just buy and hold. I think they mistyped HODL. And so that's what everybody says now. It's like HODL, and the HODL is strong with this one. And there's the gifts too of there's like a Bitcoin coin, a B, and then they put like stick figure arms and eyes on it, and he's on a roller coaster. It's like up and down and up and down. And maybe in a week that Bitcoin, might double or something, then, it's like a straight up roller coaster. And on a week where, where it drops, 50%, then it's like on a straight down roller coaster.
And it sounds like, I mean, for all the folks that are into hold, it's been the most successful thing so far.
Yeah. I haven't seen anybody, beat the whole hold strategy. I know some, I'm sure if I Google it, people will say they've crushed hold, but I just don't know anybody personally who's done that. And I'd be skeptical of anybody who says they've done that, because somehow they know what the price is going to do. But I think they're actually just trying to, get people to buy their course and pay them money.
Thanks so much, man. Let's be in touch.
Absolutely. I'll talk to you soon, Gabe.
Okay. Thanks, David.
ColoringCrypto is now a weekly podcast, releasing new episodes every Sunday for newbies who are curious and experts who think they understand. Tweet us at ColoringCrypto and leave us a review on iTunes. As a weekly podcast, we can give you long-form episodes sharing more of our conversations, like today, with Cousin David. I think I just felt relaxed in this episode, maybe because it was a family thing.